The Yanomami, also spelled Yanomamo or Yanomana, are a group of approximately 35,000 indigenous people who live in some 200 to 250 villages in the Amazon rainforest on the border between Venezuela and Brazil. The name Yanomami, the ethnonym Yanomami, was produced by anthropologists on the basis of the word Yanomami, which, in the expression Yanomami, the P signifies human beings. This expression is opposed to the categories Yaro and Nye, but also Nape. According to ethnologist Jacques Lizotte, Yanomami is the Indians' self-denomination. The term refers to communities disseminated to the south of the Orinoco, whereas the variant Yanomami is used to refer to communities north of the Orinoco. The term Sanyuma corresponds to a dialect reserved for a cultural subgroup, much influenced by the neighboring Yewana people. Other denominations applied to the Yanomami include Waika or Waika, Giaka, Shiriana, Shirishana, Guaharibo or Guajeribo, Janoamath Ninam, and Zamatari or Shamatari. History. The first report of the Yanomami to the Western world is from 1759, when a Spanish expedition under Apolinar Diez de la Fuente visited some Yacuana living on the Padamo River. Diez wrote, by interlocution of an Uramanavi Indian, I asked Chief Yoni if he had navigated by the Orinoco to its headwaters. He replied yes, and that he had gone to make war against the Guaharibo Yanomami Indians, who were not very brave, and who will not be friends with any kind of Indian. From approximately 1630 to 1720, the complex river-based societies, previously noted all around them, were wiped out or reduced as a result of slave-hunting expeditions by the Spanish conquistadors and the Portuguese bandeirantes. Whether this affected the Yanomami, and how, are matters of pure speculation. Sustained contact with the outside world began in the 1950s with the arrival of members of the New Tribes Mission as well as Jesuit and Salesian Catholic missionaries. In Roraima, the 1970s saw the implementation of development projects within the framework of the National Integration Plan, launched by the Brazilian military governments of the time. This meant the opening of a stretch of perimeter road and various colonization programs on land traditionally occupied by the Yanomami. During the same period, the Amazonian Resources Survey Project (RADAM) detected important mineral deposits in the region. This triggered a progressive movement of gold prospectors, which after 1987 took the form of a real gold rush. Hundreds of clandestine runways were opened by gold miners in the major tributaries of the Branco River between 1987 and 1990. The number of gold miners in the Yanomami area of Roraima was then estimated at 30 to 40,000, about 5 times the indigenous population resident there. Although the intensity of this gold rush has subsided a lot since 1990, gold prospecting continues today in the Yanomami land, spreading violence and serious health and social problems, increasing pressure from farmers, cattle ranchers and gold miners, as well as those interested in securing the Brazilian border by constructing roads and military bases near Yanomami communities, led to a campaign to defend the rights of the Yanomami to live in a protected area. In 1978, the Pro-Yanomami Commission was established, originally named the Commission for the Creation of a Yanomami Park. It is a Brazilian non-governmental non-profit organization dedicated to the defense of the territorial, cultural and civil rights of the Yanomami. CCPY devoted itself to a long national and international campaign to inform and sensitize public opinion and put pressure on the Brazilian government to demarcate an area suited to the needs of the Yanomami. After 13 years, the Yanomami indigenous land was officially demarcated in 1991 and approved and registered in 1992, thus ensuring that indigenous people had the constitutional right to the exclusive use of almost 96,650 square kilometers located in the states of Roraima and Amazonas. While the Constitution of Venezuela recognizes indigenous peoples' rights to their ancestral lands, few have received official title to their territories, and the government has announced it will open up large parts of the Amazon rainforest to illegal mining organization. The Yanomami do not recognize themselves as a united group, rather individuals associated with their politically autonomous village. Yanomami communities are grouped together because they have a similar cultural and linguistic background. Marriage, kinship, and militaristic coalitions interweave communities together. The Yanomami have common historical ties to Carib speakers who resided near the Orinoco River and moved to the highlands of Brazil and Venezuela, the location the Yanomami currently occupy. Mature men hold most political religious authority. A Tuxawa acts as the leader of each village, but no one leader presides over the whole of those classified as Yanomami. Headmen gain political power by demonstrating skill in settling disputes both within the village and with neighboring communities. A consensus of mature males is usually required for action that involves the community, but individuals are not required to take part. Domestic life, clothing and diet. The Yanomami live in villages usually consisting of their children and extended families. Village sizes vary, but usually contain between 50 and 400 native people. In this largely communal system, the entire village lives under a common roof called the shabono. Shabonos have a characteristic oval shape, with open grounds in the center measuring an average of 100 yards. The shabono shelter constitutes the perimeter of the village, if it has not been fortified with palisades. Under the roof, divisions exist marked only by support posts, partitioning individual houses and spaces. Shabonos are built from raw materials from the surrounding rainforest, such as leaves, vines, and tree trunks. They are susceptible to heavy damage from rains, winds, and insect infestation. As a result, new shabonos are constructed every 4 to 6 years. The Yanomami can be classified as foraging horticulturalists, depending heavily on rainforest resources. They use slash-and-burn horticulture, grow bananas, gather fruit, and hunt animals and fish. Yanomami frequently move to avoid areas that become overused, a practice known as shifting cultivation when the soil becomes exhausted. Children stay close to their mothers when young. Most of the child rearing is done by women. The Yanomami are among the few societies in the world to practice true polygamy, meaning that both polyandry and polygyny have been observed, though many unions are monogamous. Polygamous families consist of a large patrifocal family unit based on one man, and smaller matrifocal subfamilies. Each woman's family unit, composed of the woman and her children. Life in the village is centered around the small, matrilocal family unit, whereas the larger patrilocal unit has more political importance beyond the village. The Yanomami are known as hunters, fishers, and horticulturists. The women cultivate plantains and cassava in gardens as their main crops. Men do the heavy work of clearing areas of forest for the gardens. Another food source for the Yanomami is grubs. Often the Yanomami will cut down palms in order to facilitate the growth of grubs. The traditional Yanomami diet is very low in edible salt. Their blood pressure is characteristically among the lowest of any demographic group. For this reason, the Yanomami have been the subject of studies seeking to link hypertension to sodium consumption. Rituals are a very important part of Yanomami culture. The Yanomami celebrate a good harvest with a big feast to which nearby villages are invited. The Yanomami village members gather large amounts of food, which helps to maintain good relations with their neighbors. They also decorate their bodies with feathers and flowers. During the feast, the Yanomami eat a lot, and the women dance and sing late into the night. Hallucinogenic drugs or entheogens, known as yakoana or aben, are used by Yanomami shamans as part of healing rituals for members of the community who are ill. Yakoana also refers to the tree from which it is derived, virola elongata. Yopo, derived from a different plant with hallucinogenic effects, is usually cultivated in the garden by the shaman. The Zamatari also mix the powdered bark of Virola elongata with the powdered seeds of Yopo to create the drug Aben. The drugs facilitate communication with the Hekura, spirits that are believed to govern many aspects of the physical world. Women do not engage in this practice, known as Shapuri. The Yanomami people practice ritual endo-cannibalism, in which they consume the bones of deceased kinsmen. The body is wrapped in leaves and placed in the forest some distance from the shabono. Then, after insects have consumed the soft tissue, the bones are collected and cremated. The ashes are then mixed with a kind of soup made from bananas which is consumed by the entire community. The ashes may be preserved in a gourd and the ritual repeated annually until the ashes are gone. In daily conversation, no reference may be made to a dead person except on the annual Day of Remembrance, when the ashes of the dead are consumed and people recall the lives of their deceased relatives. This tradition is meant to strengthen the Yanomami people and keep the spirit of that individual alive. The women are responsible for many domestic duties and chores, excluding hunting and killing game for food. Although the women do not hunt, they do work in the gardens and gather fruits, tubers, nuts and other wild foodstuffs. The garden plots are sectioned off by family, and grow bananas, plantains, sugarcane, mangoes, sweet potatoes, papayas, manioc, corn, and other crops. Yanomami women cultivate until the gardens are no longer fertile, and then move their plots. Women are expected to carry 70 to 80 pounds of crops on their backs during harvesting, using bark straps and woven baskets. In the mornings, while the men are off hunting, the women and young children go off in search of termite nests and other grubs, which will later be roasted at the family hearths. The women also pursue frogs, land crabs, or caterpillars, or even look for vines that can be woven into baskets. While some women gather these small sources of food, other women go off and fish for several hours during the day. The women also prepare manioc, shredding the roots and expressing the toxic juice, then roasting the flour to make flat cakes, which they cook over a small pile of coals. Yanomami women are expected to take responsibility for the children, who are expected to help their mothers with domestic chores from a very young age, and mothers rely very much on help from their daughters. Boys typically become the responsibility of the male members of the community after about age 8. Using small strings of bark and roots, Yanomami women weave and decorate baskets. They use these baskets to carry plants, crops, and food to bring back to the shabono. They use a red berry known as onato or uraku to dye the baskets, as well as to paint their bodies and dye their loincloths. After the baskets are painted, they are further decorated with masticated charcoal pigment. Female puberty and menstruation. The start of menstruation symbolizes the beginning of womanhood. Girls typically get their periods between the ages of 10 and 12, and as soon as the period begins, girls are married off. Due to the belief that menstrual blood is poisonous and dangerous, girls are kept hidden away in a small tent-like structure constructed of a screen of leaves. A deep hole is built in the structure over which girls squat, to rid themselves of their blood. These structures are regarded as isolation screens. The mother is notified immediately, and she, along with the elder female friends of the girl, are responsible for disposing of her old cotton garments and must replace them with new ones symbolizing her womanhood and availability for betrothal. During the week of that first menstrual period, the girl is fed with a stick, for she is forbidden to touch the food in any way. While on confinement, she has to whisper when speaking, and she may only speak to close kin, such as siblings or parents, but never a male. Up until the time of menstruation, girls are treated as children, and are only responsible for assisting their mothers in household work. When they approach the age of menstruation, they are sought out by men as potential wives. Puberty is not seen as a significant time period with male Yanomami children, but it is considered very important for females. After menstruating for the first time, the girls are expected to leave childhood and enter adulthood, and take on the responsibilities of a grown Yanomami woman. After a young girl gets her period, she is forbidden to show her genitalia and must keep herself covered with a loincloth. The menstrual cycle of Yanomami women does not occur frequently due to constant nursing or childbirthing, and is treated as a very significant occurrence only at this time. Language. The Yanomami language family comprises 4 main languages: Yanom, Sanuma, Yanomami and Yanomamo. Many local variations and dialects also exist, such that people from different villages cannot always understand each other. Many linguists consider the Yanomami family to be a language isolate, unrelated to other South American indigenous languages. The origins of the language are obscure. Violence. In early anthropological studies, the Yanomami culture was described as being permeated with violence. The Yanomami people have a history of acting violently not only towards other tribes, but towards one another. An influential ethnography by anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon described the Yanomami as living in a state of chronic warfare. Chagnon's account and similar descriptions of the Yanomami portrayed them as aggressive and warlike, and sparked controversy amongst anthropologists and created an enormous interest in the Yanomami. The debate centered around the degree of violence in Yanomami society. The question of whether violence and warfare could be seen as an inherent part of Yanomami culture, or whether it was better explained as a response to specific historical situations. Writing in 1985, anthropologist Jacques Lizotte, who had lived among the Yanomami for more than 20 years, stated, "I would like my book to help revise the exaggerated representation that has been given of Yanomami violence. The Yanomami are warriors. They can be brutal and cruel, but they can also be delicate, sensitive, and loving. Violence is only sporadic. It never dominates social life for any length of time, and long peaceful moments can separate two explosions. When one is acquainted with the societies of the North American plains or the societies of the Chaco in South America, one cannot say that Yanomami culture is organized around warfare as Chagnon does." Anthropologists working in the ecologist tradition such as Marvin Harris argued that a culture of violence had evolved among the Yanomami through competition resulting from a lack of nutritional resources in their territory. However, the 1995 study, Yanomami Warfare, by R. Brian Ferguson, examined all documented cases of warfare among the Yanomami and concluded that, although some Yanomami really have been engaged in intensive warfare and other kinds of bloody conflict, this violence is not an expression of Yanomami culture itself. It is, rather, a product of specific historical situations. The Yanomami make war not because Western culture is absent, but because it is present, and present in certain specific forms. All Yanomami warfare that we know about occurs within what Neil Whitehead and I call a tribal zone, an extensive area beyond state administrative control, inhabited by non-state people who must react to the far-flung effects of the state presence. Ferguson stresses the idea that contrary to Chagnon's description of the Yanomami as unaffected by Western culture, the Yanomami experienced the effects of colonization long before their territory became accessible to Westerners in the 1950s, and that they had acquired many influences and materials from Western culture through trade networks much earlier. Violence is one of the leading causes of Yanomami death. Up to half of all of Yanomami males die violent deaths in the constant conflict between neighboring communities over local resources. Often these confrontations lead to the Yanomami leaving their villages in search of new ones. Women are often victims of physical abuse and anger. Inter-village warfare is common, but does not too commonly affect women. When Yanomami tribes fight and raid nearby tribes, women are often raped, beaten, and brought back to the Shabono to be adopted into the captors' community. Wives may be beaten frequently, so as to keep them docile and faithful to their husbands. Sexual jealousy causes much of the violence. Women are beaten with clubs, sticks, machetes, and other blunt or sharp objects. Burning with a branding stick occurs often, and symbolizes a male's strength or dominance over his wife. Yanomami men have been known to kill children while raiding enemy villages. Helena Valero, a Brazilian woman kidnapped by Yanomami warriors in the 1930s, witnessed a Karawateri raid on her tribe. They killed so many. I was weeping for fear and for pity, but there was nothing I could do. They snatched the children from their mothers to kill them, while the others held the mothers tightly by the arms and wrists as they stood up in a line. All the women wept. The men began to kill the children, little ones, bigger ones. They killed many of them.